I'm John Wakefield, and tonight I will be presenting a presentation on how to conduct business in China and the risks associated with such. I'm John Wakefield. Today's technology allows for a more global economy that makes it easier to share information and goods across borders. Businesses can expand and become global easier than ever thanks to the World Wide Web. So this has led to an economic boom such as countries in China. The expansion in China has been great. They're experiencing unprecedented growth, mostly due to foreign businesses importing and exporting within China. Within January to July 2018 timeframe, reached a total of US dollars 2,608 billion, which is an increase of 16.4% year on year. So this is a great opportunity for any businesses that are looking to expand their business within China. This right here is a graph of China's GDP over time. As you can see, there's a rapid increase over the last decade or so. It does seem to drop off a little bit as of recently, but is still an upward trend, as you can see from this graph. So if business is looking to expand their businesses into China, take advantage of that booming economy, there are a couple of issues that need to be looked at in addition to any other issues that typically come up with expanding. Some are such as cultural differences. In China, relationships, our business relationships, take a very high precedence, and there are also many different cultural subtleties that need to be navigated, which we'll discuss in this presentation. We also need to look at the legal aspects. As in 2016, there was a new cybersecurity law that will definitely affect any cybersecurity program or how assets are managed. There's also just the legal implications of starting a business in China, all the paperwork associated with such. And then we also need to look at protecting assets in a foreign land, specifically intellectual property, how their trademark laws work, and what we can do to mitigate any risks associated with the loss of intellectual property. So on the topic of cultural differences and things that foreign businesses should be aware of when conducting business in China, the first one that springs to mind is the language barrier. Obviously, Chinese is not an easy language to learn, and in our case, English is not an easy language to learn either. So it would be a little presumptuous to assume that there are a lot of English speakers in China. So we need to look at that first. And obviously, you could hire an interpreter, or you could have hire people that know Chinese already. But even within that, there are different subtleties within that need to be looked at. One example is with family names. So the family name, or like typically in Western culture, the last name is considered a great source of pride. So it is considered impolite to call someone by their last name only, or by a nickname prior to knowing them well. Another example is within Chinese culture is the shaking hands. Now I know that there's the stereotype that bowing is the appropriate way, but in many ways Chinese culture has adopted Western culture, such as with shaking hands. Now the practice of bowing still does exist in situations where it's not practical. Example, for a large group of people, bowing is typical practice. Another thing that should be looked at are conversations or topics that may be considered rude. As within Western culture, topics such as religion might be considered rude or touchy subject. Also with the Chinese government, things concerning that should not be brought up, obviously. Some socially acceptable topics that should be spoken about are the weather, family, children, Chinese cuisine is a good topic, sightseeing, sports, or any neutral topics that would not offend the host nation. So relationships in general are very important. Also, Guanzi, spoken in Chinese, they're important to any business venture. So dinners, going out for tea, dinner banquets, these are all key elements in forming proper business relationships. This is not something that can be ignored or skimped on. So any companies that are looking to form partnerships within China should logistically consider this. Another thing that needs to be considered is the new cybersecurity law that was put into place. This was designed in 2016 and was implemented in June 2017. Some of the big changes that came with this is how network operators need to maintain logs. Specifically, Article 48, which outlines the responsibilities of network administrators and operators, explains that electronic information distribution service providers and application software download service providers shall perform security management duties, and where they know that their users have conduct provided for the preceding paragraph shall stop providing services and employ measures such as removal, store relevant records, and report to the relevant competent departments. With this comes Article 21, which outlines the retention of IA logs, or information assurance logs. This is important because while logs should be kept in general, the Chinese government has the right to review such logs. And the problem with this comes with the any intellectual property that may be contained in these logs. And as we're expanding into a foreign country, or China so to say, there is the issue of intellectual property getting into the wrong hands or being misappropriated. Unfortunately, there's really no way around these laws. Employees can be legally held liable under Chapter 6 of the cybersecurity law. So we're going to have to make sure that any business looking to expand there reviews their cybersecurity program, make sure it's compliant with this law, while also taking into account anything that they want to make sure stays safe. Another important thing that must be looked at before expanding is how to set up the business. How is it registered? How is it licensed? And the most common way to do that in China is the Wholly Foreign Owned Business, or the WFOE. This is the most popular option. 75% of American investment in the People's Republic of China is under a WFOE. For most businesses looking to expand into China, this is the best option, as the company retains control of the product and organization. Other options are for businesses already established in China, which as a business looking to expand there would not apply to us. So even if the business is still strictly foreign owned, it is important to have advisors and contractors who are familiar or fluent in Chinese business law to file the correct paperwork. This process can take up to 18 months, and presumably longer if it is people who are inexperienced with this sort of thing. So there's many things that we need to consider here, such as registering a name, leasing a space, an environmental impact assessment, and the legal aspect of such as the business license and opening a bank account to handle currency conversion and important export procedures. So there's a lot to look at here. There are companies that do specialize in establishing foreign businesses in China, such as Hongda Business Services, and they provide this service at prices starting just under $6,000. Getting the proper licensings will save a lot of trouble later on. So it is important to maintain control of the business while conforming to Chinese law. Finally, we need to look at the risks that are involved with expanding business and how are we going to mitigate these things. When expanding business into China, one of the biggest concerns is the theft of intellectual property. Chinese theft of intellectual property, like specifically, costs between 225 billion and 600 billion annually. As we said, there's no loopholes around the cybersecurity law. Logs are going to be looked at. So it's really just a matter of, like, is this risk versus reward? China does have the reputation of stealing foreign intellectual property, so this is a legitimate concern. So the best way to mitigate this issue is to ensure that any intellectual property is properly registered and trademarked within the People's Republic of China. China does have a first-come, first-served system, so if intellectual property were to be stolen within China and filed prior to our company doing that, we would be out of luck, unfortunately. The standards that are set under the Chinese National Information Security Standardization Technical Committee, the TC260, do allow for source code review, and this could reveal obviously source code, which is intellectual property. So even if the trademarks were registered, there's still the threat of losing intellectual property and having it misappropriated. The other risks involved are, as we were saying, like setting up the business, setting up a WFOE, and any paperwork or getting trapped within a legal quagmire, so to say. Having the paperwork caught in a state of limbo, which could take, as we said, like a minimum of 18 months, could take years, losing out on potential business opportunities. The best way around this is going to be to make sure that we have seasoned professionals who have dealt with this sort of thing before, to make sure that all the proper paperwork is filed and filed correctly the first time. And then finally, as we talked about, Chinese customs, and just making sure that any employees that are going to be conduct business or to go out to dinners or tea sessions are well aware of what the local customs are, as to not offend the host nation. Relationships are an important necessity. I mean, they are an important part of business in China, so they're not something that should be taken lightly. So expanding business to a foreign country is no easy feat, and China has specific difficulties and special considerations that need to be looked at in regards to cybersecurity and intellectual property. China does have a booming economy. There is a lot to gain from expanding to China. But this should not come at the risk of losing trademarks or intellectual property. The 2016 cybersecurity law is still new. People don't know the full effects of it. It's purposely broad, and as something that needs to be looked at and considered, and the worst case scenario needs to be looked at. And the company needs to look at, does the risk equal the reward? Like, does the worst case scenario, does the risk of that outweigh the gain that can be made from expanding to China, expanding production there, expanding the product there? Thank you for listening to my presentation. It was a great audience. I hope everyone has a great night. Following were references that were utilized within my presentation. Following were references that were utilized within my presentation.